So hello everyone. I actually recorded a 6 dan game that I wanted to upload for tomorrow, a live game, but I ended up having a problem with the video itself, which was a little bit disappointing. So I figured maybe it would be fun to try out a game review and see how you guys enjoy that. Maybe a little bit more of a detailed game review since this is a 6 dan game. You'll get to see how I ended up playing. So I was black in this game. And I have the win rate graph right below me. As you can see, I made a little bit of a mistake in the opening, but it wasn't too big of a deal. And then I gained a very large advantage, and then I made a mistake later on in the game. It's a little disappointing, but I think that overall it was a good and interesting game. So I have currently been liking it playing this opening here. This enclosure just feels really nice. Like any sort of move in the area that's trying to attack this enclosure is difficult to get a really good result as white. So in comparison to like the knight's move here, I made a little short about that. I don't like it when white can just attach at the belly here, or even the shoulder hit here to reduce things. But with the uh, one space jump, the only real thing you have to learn is this attachment here, which is played later on in the game. And after you've learned this, even though it's quite complicated, it's actually quite nice. Like most of the end results, I feel are quite nice for black. In this case, though, my opponent decided to just take the 3-3 point. Now, something that's interesting, the classical way of blocking here would just be to sort of grow on the right side of the board, which is what I play in the game. However, it's perfectly acceptable to block from this direction as well. If we just play this Joseki, you could try to approach on the top or approach on the bottom, but what you're choosing here is to just do sort of like a broken up territorial game. So this is where you would potentially want to do another 3-3 in one of the corners, or to even break up the left side in some way. However, I'm not exactly comfortable with this particular opening blocking this way, so I feel like it's much simpler, much more easier to understand the game, just doing this basic block. Because I have my enclosure, and they took this corner, I get to take my sente and do a developing move, which is why I like this. It feels like I'm getting this very large framework built up. And it's a little bit difficult to choose the right next move. What I'm currently testing out is the sliding move here. The most modern move, I guess you could say, is the attachment. But with this attachment, it feels as if white is the one who's actually getting sort of the influence here. And it feels a little bit difficult because white can just keep pushing and developing the center here. So it feels like my potential framework is not really coming together this way. The other type of move I could play, which is perfectly acceptable, is just backing off to build the framework directly. However, I've been trying to do a little bit more of a territorial focus, and while the attachment would be territorial, I like the slide. If my opponent just responds, then you can play this 2 space, so the large knight here. This used to be considered pretty bad, or at least not very proper, but it's actually perfectly acceptable now. I think one of my first Joseki videos, I covered this, saying that this is not a good idea because your opponent can just invade here, and you have a lot of weaknesses in the area. However, it's not really that big of a deal because you can just kick, and you've fixed the majority of the Aji here because your opponent is going to be weaker than you are. And if you just jump like this, it's just up to your opponent to survive, and it's unlikely they'll be able to really take a large advantage of your shape here. So this was sort of my goal here. But if you know anything about this sliding move, it's not really sente because this group of 2 stones here is actually a very flexible group. So white doesn't really need to respond even if you play like 2 or 3 more moves around it, and it can still really survive. So it's sort of a soft move, but it's a softer territorial move. So instead of playing the 3-3 here, they decided to do this attachment, which I mentioned earlier. So there's sort of 2 different ways of dealing with this. You don't really want to extend up or down. You could play at A. So it's sort of like you played the small knight and they did the shoulder hit and you pushed up. That is acceptable, but it's not really what you're looking for here. What you really want is to play the Hane over the top at B or play the Hane underneath at C. Maybe we'll start with C since I did not play that one in the game. This is the one I typically like to play because when your opponent double Hanes here, you don't want to connect because this would be a good exchange for your opponent. They don't even need to respond anymore. These two stones have already gotten a lot of value. So you want to cut right away and push here. And it seems quite dangerous, but it's actually kind of difficult for white to handle. The dangerous part you would think would be this Atari here into maybe coming out on the top. But there's too much sort of weakness in white's position. And white can't really give these two stones up too easily because of how strong it makes black's position just overall on the board. And even if white is able to grab the corner, it's not a very big corner. And there's a lot of aji here. Even if white just connects solidly, it's still kind of difficult to answer this. So you don't really have to worry about these stones really getting cut off here. All white has to do is extend up here, threatening to capture the stones. Then you just capture these two stones, and white gets a free move here, threatening to capture the 3. And then it becomes a little bit of a fight in the center here. But as you can see, black ends up getting a very decent corner. And white still has 2 potential weak groups, which is why I like this variation for black. White usually turns here, black just jumps, and there's a lot of variations from here, including just playing this side or playing the tiger's mouth or jumping directly. It all depends on what you want to do. But if we go back to the beginning here, there aren't really any other variations that white could do here. Now, with the move I played in the game, there are 2 sort of different ways to play this one. But the one that I really like here and what I really wanted to do was that white usually will Hane here. And you can just Atari and push down. This looks kind of weird. I didn't quite understand it when I first saw it. But it's actually kind of hard for white to take advantage of any of the cutting points right now because they don't have enough liberties on their stones. If they try to do some sort of cutting thing, you see that all of black's stones are actually fairly strong. And white still needs to try to live in the corner. And it's likely to make black even stronger on the outside. So white usually Ataris here and does the Hane. And the basic variation goes like this. It looks like white got a decent amount out of the corner, especially since black invested 2 moves there. So that's why I was hesitant to play this sort of variation when I very first saw it. However, you can see that black's position on the outside is extremely thick. And it's unlikely to ever really be attacked. And I have an ability to develop on the right side or on the bottom side quite easily. And so this is what I wanted in the game. And then I think there's one more variation. Oh yes, if black Atari's here and just connects, you usually do not want to push here as white because taking the corner is very large. Even though you get this Atari, you still need to play another move here to make sure your group is settled. But black got a lot of influence and the corner in Sente, and I can go back and play this move. This seems quite good for black. So white needs to take the tiger's mouth in the corner, and black can block that. And then white can come out. It's just a small difference here, but it's leaving a little bit more weakness in black shape with this push and cut, making it easier to do something on the bottom side. While that was my plan in the game, was to do the surrounding Joseki, my opponent decided to play this move, which is not really that good. But I wasn't sure how to respond to it because I've never really seen anyone do it. I know now what I can do, but one of the things I think about when I'm not exactly sure how to respond to a move, even if I think it could potentially be a little bit too slow, is to just play something solid like this. I don't know this variation. I don't know if there's something special here, if this is a trick. So if I just stay solid here, I get the corner and I'm likely able to develop the bottom, which is what I wanted. And he still has to figure out his shape here. And in the game, white did just extend, and it feels like a good position for black, and it feels slightly awkward for white, in my opinion. But I did end up making a little bit of a mistake. So first, let's see what I should have played. Now that I know, and I've looked it up and figured it out, if I see this, I can play this Atari and push down. It's the same sort of idea as all the other variations that I just showed you. This Atari and push seems to be very strong with this corner shape. I believe there are sort of two ways that white can play. It would be like this Atari here, and then the Hane. And it's kind of a difficult fight, but I can at the very least Atari down and jump out in some way, low or maybe just high, similar to one of the other variations here. Jumping high might be a little bit easier to handle. And white just has to live here, which is a little bit annoying for white. This seems like a decent fight for me. Then the other option is white could play this. So the other Hane sort of gives you a little bit of fight towards the side, probably sacrificing the group, whereas this Kosumi here is threatening to capture the stone. And in this case, you actually have a cool technique, common tesuji you can use here. And that's black would just extend down to prevent this Hane. And when white captures the stone, you can counter Atari. And then Atari again. Capture and just extend down here. You see that it's very similar to the position where I got to surround my opponent completely, except in this case, they have a smaller corner, and I probably have a little bit of a stronger outside position. So this is probably the way I should have tried to move the game towards. I wasn't exactly sure. When you're unsure about how to respond to something, it's best to just play a solid, simple move. And you can let your opponent show you how this is going to work, which he did. He extended down, which was, I wasn't sure exactly, but this seems to be a good move. What I should do to continue on with my simple line of play is this Hane, push. I can play something over here. White would want to defend, and then I can just build my bottom side really nicely. This one exchange just helps make my group a little bit more solid over here. Even if they can attack, it's just a little bit more easy to manage. And then I get a nice potential in the bottom. So this would be really good for me. But what I did in the game was I thought I didn't really want to give white a very strong position. And I very often just Hane and let them have something like that. So I wanted to try to fight a little bit and see what I could get. So I decided to go for the clamp, which is not the worst move in the game. But if you look at that graph, that's the first drop, was this clamp. After this, it was a little bit bad for me. So white gets to extend up. So I decided to just go down and sort of make white into this stick shape. This seemed okay because it looks like I can potentially make points on the right side. And white doesn't really have a base. Even if they try to go into the corner, there's not really much there. White decides to just turn, and I decide I can double Hane here. And as you can see, my plan ended up working really nicely. I got to make a lot of points here. It's very likely these will be my points. It's unlikely that white will be able to invade very strongly. And white is not really a super strong group yet. So they defend themselves a little bit, and I prevented myself from being completely surrounded. And then we get to my next real sort of mistake in the game. It's not a big deal, but I want to try to get a little bit stronger, and I need to try to look for the more severe moves. So I rushed a little bit with this move and just played the Hane underneath, which again is not a terrible move, especially because of how my opponent played in the game. But I could actually Hane over the top, Atari down, and extend here like this. There is a really cool tesuji that the AI showed me. They can play something like this one. It's kind of annoying. If they played this in the game, I wouldn't be sure what to do. However, this fight in general should be fairly good for me, especially because white's stones in the middle here are not really settled yet. And it's a similar sort of idea as to my connection here. I could have done the Atari and push down, which is the same sort of shape here. This shape is the same one that I could have played on the right side. However, this is not going to lose me the game, this Hane. It's just I need to, as I said, I need to look for more severe moves in my game when I can. But my opponent played a little bit weird. They did this double Hane, which was definitely a mistake. This should be easy for many people to understand, though. It's just this Atari and connect is just completely destroying white's connection and the shape here. So it's difficult for white to really manage this area. But I do need to fix my shape here, or fix my base here. So I just take the corner, and when he blocks the corner, I felt a little bit awkward, but I have to do this bump, and then I jump out here just to keep everything separated. It looks like, if you check the board right now, this bottom group is potentially a weak group. This middle group here is potentially a weak group. And depending on what white does, this left side group is also potentially weak. I definitely have a little bit of an advantage now. You can see on the graph, this is where the everything starts to ramp up towards the top, towards the 100% mark, before it falls right back down later on. I did miss a good move in this area. Instead of jumping out here, I do have a move like this to completely separate the groups. This bottom group is very likely going to live because it could connect up to the left side, and it can capture this one stone. But I can also just attack this middle group. I made it weak earlier. That was my plan with this clamping move I did, which was bad shape, but I sort of accomplished all my goals with it. So I need to continue on with my plan, but I never end up doing this. So this was definitely a mistake for me. Again, a severe move that I need to try to look for. There's nothing really wrong with this move. It's just the type of move that I need to try to find more. White tries to make a little bit of a base in the corner, and this is an opportunity when white pushes here for me to change the course of the game and to try to gain a small advantage. Now, if I'm playing the AI, it's not really going to be a big advantage from what they were saying, but I think against a regular human player, the person who goes on the offensive first and is sort of controlling the flow of the game is likely to be the person who wins the game. So this move right here at c8 is a good move for me to just attack this group. There is a little bit of Aji in my other side here because I have a small amount of a shortage of liberties on my 3 stones. So white can come in and do a little damage over here, but I can also just attack everything really nicely. Now it's not too big of a deal. This move, which is very much my style, is just a very solid move and doesn't lose me anything. But as I said, the person who takes the initiative first in most amateur games is often the person who ends up winning the game, as long as you don't make a blunder. But I said this one's perfectly fine, and white gets to defend on the left side. So white made themselves a little bit stronger in the center, and played the left side. There's not really much to do in the center here. It seems unlikely that white will be able to build anything because I have a stone jumping up here at f5, and I have the m4 stone preventing anything from really being strong over here. So now could be a time for me to play in that center move here like this. I ended up playing the 3-3 instead, which was perfectly acceptable. There's not really a reason to approach on either side because allowing white to get a move over here, for example, just sort of potentially solidifies some points on this side. And just making a base here like this doesn't really seem that nice on the board. Honestly, it's probably fine, but it doesn't really seem that nice. And if I do the attach and Hane, we get this position again where white is potentially building something here. And white already has some influence in the center. This just doesn't feel quite right. And if I'm going to do something like this, I want to try to get as much territory as I can. So I like doing just the 3-3 directly. Just personal preference, I always like to push instead of the slide, but it's not really too big of a deal. I play this move, which was big, but I think this Atari and extend down was very nice for me. And at this point, I believe I am like 10 points ahead. You know, that ramping up that I think I'm reaching the peak on the graph there underneath me. If I just play a simple game from here on out, I probably just win by at least around 10 points, 10 to 20 points, but I ended up making some mistakes. First, white played just some end game. They decided to just do end game right now, think it was a little bit early because I think it's possible for white to even try to build the left side at least a little bit. So I feel like these moves were a little bit too slow, but I'm responding to them because if he Ataris this and I don't get a lot from my invasion on the left side or something, then I do lose almost all of my points here. So they're big enough to respond to. I just think the timing is wrong. It's unlikely I would have gotten these moves first. But then they play this one, which is definitely way too small. And I try to point that out a little bit to them by not responding and playing this connection. This connection is actually very, very big. This was at least 6 to 10 points if white captured because there is a really nice follow-up, Hane. But this also makes white a little bit unsettled here. And this area that they've added to this right side is only one eye. So this middle group can still be attacked depending on what happens. So there's still technically two weak groups. So me getting this connection was very nice for me. But they just continue to play end game. So I just reduce. I have plenty of points. If I just reduce this game, I'll be fine. And I play a little bit... right here, I'm actually playing fine. But a little bit later, I end up playing badly. I do these this bump and jump down just to keep everything separated. This group is technically a little bit weak. But it also gets rid of all the points here as well. And my opponent makes a couple mistakes here, like this direction was wrong, and they should have probably gone from the other direction here. But that makes it easy for me to just come out towards the center and save my group. But this is where I sort of make a mistake here. He does this Hane and connect, and then I turn. And this turn was quite bad. So the reason I want to turn here is because, and I could respond in the corner. This would be sort of fine. But I feel like the center is more important right now. So this is somewhat okay. But let's say I just play some sort of move in the center here. There is this cutting Aji that I have to worry about that makes this a little bit dangerous for me. So I do want to protect it. And so by playing the turn, I do end up protecting it. I thought, like, my thought process was that turning is sort of connecting my groups up a little bit, surrounding them on the left side, and getting rid of the Aji here. But in the game, he does this double Hane, which actually brings the Aji back. There's still something that's possible here, which makes it a little bit annoying. So I did learn something really cool from AI, which is a nice Tesuji here. After this connection, instead of turning, which provides some liberty problems, I need to extend my liberties. So I could extend here at J17. This is probably a good thing for me to remember because this is a pretty common shape in a lot of my own games. Because I end up playing this sort of either the 3-3 or the press down Josekis, where my opponent can push in and do cuts on either side. It's very common, and so this sort of move is good to know. This is actually quite nice. It's hard to find the right move for white to severely attack black while also preventing the connection up to this top area or to the other center. So if I just do this, I should be ahead by over 10 points. The game is nice for me. But this turn, as I said, was no good, especially not just saving my group and extending here. If I just go to save my group, then this is perfectly acceptable for me. Doing this was a little bit too much. And then again, if I just save my group now, then the game should be perfectly fine. It's going to be a little bit closer because white is going to likely capture these stones. It may not go exactly like that, but it's possible for white to capture these stones. But it should still be good for me. What I was trying to do here was be a little bit more aggressive towards my opponent here, because as you can see, they're not really alive. But I wasn't really considering all my cutting points and the fact that they can likely capture these two stones here. Because of these cutting points, it's possible they're going to be able to get this sort of thing that they could play on the side here to potentially capture these stones. And they can just push here and just capture these. You know, like it's, as you can see there's a lot of points here that white can potentially make here. There's a lot to worry about. This isn't the best variation. This is just to illustrate the idea. the main line here, I play this move here at e13 because, as I said, they're not really alive yet. So this feels like a good timing to play it. And then they play this Hane, which ends up being good for me because I get to fix my shape. So my opponent was very nice. They decided that they didn't need to punish me, which I'm very grateful for. They block here, and again, I have another chance. I can just come out right now, make 2 eyes, be fine. I can let them capture this 1 stone if they really want to, and I can just um, surround, get my eye shape, and be fine in the game. It'll be a little bit closer because I got to capture this stone, but it's not too big of a deal. But see, there's a lot of like little timings where I could have, or little things that I should have done to just protect myself. But in the end, what ends up happening is that I protect here because I thought that I could maybe attack this. But something you should really notice here is that even if my opponent can't do anything on the outside, um, it's likely that white is going to have a big eye. And if I can even make 1 eye on the outside, I'll only have a small eye. So it's very likely that white will have more liberties than me, no matter what. And they have the capture in the corner at b18 to get a couple more liberties. So if it comes down to a liberty fight, which is what you have to think about when you're trying to attack someone like this, it's very, very likely that it will benefit my opponent more than me, that they'll very likely have more liberties. But I was a little bit too focused on trying to push a little bit harder instead of backing away, because I back away. I feel like I back away too much. But I'm also very aggressive. I play, yeah, it's weird the problems that I have with my game. So they just surround me. I put a little bit more pressure, and I try to make some eye space, but there isn't really much I can do, and my opponent can just defend themselves. And the thing that I was relying on was this push and cut. However, it's actually quite obvious that this doesn't work. My opponent can just Atari. Oh yeah, I pushed first. Okay. I tried to change the order of moves to get a little bit of something to see if I could figure something out, but it seems a little bit too difficult. But this is the problem that I actually had, was that this push and cut did not actually work. I misread here. If the push and cut worked, I figured I had a little bit more possibility here, because if he has to go back and defend, then it felt like this could be an eye versus an eye, and it might be a fight for me. But again, this is a big eye versus a small eye, so it's unlikely to really work out for me. So the bigger takeaways for me, I don't know if I can shift click here. Can I shift click? No, I can't. Very sad. But the biggest takeaways for me, if we go back to the beginning of the game here, just scroll all the way back, I guess, right? There we go. Was that I can play a little bit more aggressively, especially when I have strength in the area like this. And it seems that almost any sort of Hane here can be met with this Atari and push. This one is a little bit more aggressive, but it seems that, as I said, most of these Hanes are met with this shape, even when white plays this one. That's just a shape that I need to think about a little bit more, because it was also like that later on in the game. This wasn't too big of a deal. I'm not too worried about that. But again, here, I could Hane over the top and do this same shape. So this is a shape that I need to play more in my games just to test it out, even if it's not good. In certain situations, I need to just play it and figure it out. And then the last thing is that after taking the advantage here, I needed to focus on just playing the safe moves, like this Tetsuji, and just defending my group in the center. If I play very simple, when I have a weak group and my opponent potentially has a much stronger group, you know, it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way, right? When my opponent has a stronger group and I have a weaker group, I should just be defending. It sucks a little bit that you won't be able to see the live game recording because I had problems with it. However, this was a really fun game. I think I did better than I was expecting based on how I've been playing lately. And so I hope you enjoyed this game review. Let me know if you want to see more games, more game reviews like this. But I think next week, hopefully, we'll be coming back with a live game and not not a random review like this. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys are having a good day. All right, have fun.